All right. So, I mean, this is Green Room. This is going to be a really, I think, dope conversation about how you kind of came to be where you are. Nothing too serious. We can have a good time on this call. Um, but our community, we had the idea to start this class and just to maybe have 25 to 50 students in it, and it turned out that we've got like more than 750 people who signed up for this. So we're super excited to have the opportunity to not only do the in-person classes on Wednesday, but also kind of provide these conversations so that the entire community can like watch them and reflect on them and respond to questions, really gain from the insights of other folks who've gone before them to do really cool things. And, the whole concept of community college is like we're doing life together, not just learning and like educating ourselves. So hopefully we'll be able to uncover some really cool gems and nuggets from your story. But maybe we start off with just having you give an intro of yourself, tell the people a little bit about who you are, where you are, and what you're into right now.
Yeah, of course. My name is June Johnson. I mostly grew up on the East Coast, but I've been out in California for a decade now, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I originally started off in PR, fashion PR specifically. I love the environment, I love the fast paced nature of it. But I quickly kind of started not loving it just because of the type of clients I was dealing with and energy and stuff like that. And it just really didn't feel like it was my purpose. And so I switched over to doing events, which I absolutely love. And that allowed me to work with clients such as Hennessy and Moet and Shandon and, all kinds of really great programming stuff for the NBA All-Star Game and fashion, New York Fashion Week and stuff like that. And I moved from Los Angeles up to San Francisco about 2 years ago for a job that actually ghosted on me. Um, yeah, it was. I mean, to move up to a city of San Francisco, like sign a lease and everything, then have the job you moved up here for just like completely vanish. And it was a really tricky time in my life because that same week my mom had been diagnosed with cancer. And I was taking care of her at that point. And so it just felt like the weight of the world on my shoulders. And so I made a mad scramble to try to apply to other jobs and interview. And I'm so blessed and so fortunate because the job that hired me is this woman-owned and woman-led cannabis delivery company here in the Bay Area. And that's really what kind of segued and brought me into the cannabis space. It wasn't something I'd ever, if you had asked me in college if I was going to work in cannabis, I would have told you no. And it's not that I ever was against it because I enjoyed, partaking in high school and a little bit in college and stuff like that. But it was always just kind of casual use. And so I never saw myself designing events in that space. And the history of it has been tricky in my mind too. And so I just wasn't sure about approaching it. But the way that this company creates this space, I'm really honored to be a part of it and to really be able to create further space for Black and brown people. So that was kind of my little journey into cannabis and into this space.
Very cool. You mentioned a couple things that I want to dig into a little bit as it pertains to like caring for others and caring for yourself. Like you mentioned that you got to the Bay Area and it was particularly stressful from a job perspective, but then also that you were caretaking. Just this past 2 weeks, we've experienced so much like ups and downs in our economy and in our area geographically with the fires here in the Bay Area. Like a question that I have is like back when you first got here and then even now, like how have you taken time to like care for yourself to like make sure you were okay to be able to go out and do your job or to be able to go out and be like a rock for somebody else?
That's so crucial. And I'd say now more than ever, it's really about finding really helpful and impactful tools to be able to take care of yourself. I've always, well, I won't say always, that is a lie. I have learned to really adopt the airplane model of putting on your mask first, because if you aren't in a stable place, you really can't help anyone else. And I've learned that the hard way through, caretaking to the point of codependency and not leaving enough space and time for caretaking for myself and feeling very run down and resentful. And those are like the workings of becoming a martyr. And so part of what helps me out is therapy. I cannot stress that enough. Having someone to be able to talk to who can help you shift patterns and experiences so that you're not replicating them. That's been huge for healing not only just my own trauma, but generational trauma. And really learning the beautiful word of no has helped me and is continuing to help me, because I get excited about what everyone's doing and I want to help and I want to be a part of it. And so having that boundary of, that's really cool and I support you in this, but that's not something I can take on at this time, I'd say was one of the biggest steps in being able to even carve out space to know that I could have for myself and know that it was blocked off from me. So being able to say no, being in therapy, creating healthy boundaries, and really understanding the differences. We hear fight or flight, but there's another whole response of fawning, which is caretaking. And I feel, especially as a Black woman in this society, we are often expected to caretake for so many without ever filling our own cup. We're marked by our success in being able to do that. And it's an unlearning of that really has helped me be able to take care of myself, really.
Yeah, it's interesting that so many of us, Black, white, and other, have been like shepherded by Black women, have been taught by Black women over the years, have been supported. But when Black women go up for opportunities sometimes, like that kind of stuff is not like necessarily the stuff you put on a resume or the thing that shines so brightly, so that there's not as much representation as what we would like. So that point, 3 snaps for that, because I know in my own life, kind of having sisters, having aunties, grandmother's still with us. My mom has been a great just source of inspiration and motivation for my own path. So that's some bars right there that I'm hoping people put in their back pocket and take from this conversation.
Absolutely. And it's really up to us to call it out and spotlight it too. I've had to learn how not to, like I said, be a martyr and just, put my feelings and my needs on pause, and instead being like, what, this is actually what I need. And releasing myself from caring what other people think, whether I'm labeled angry or this or that. What, they're going to label me whatever they want to. They've done all my life anyway, so I might as well be happy with how I'm moving through this world with any label that's coming through. So I think it's up to us to also really point it out, how much experience, how much accolades Black women really are deserved of, and how it's not been reciprocated in the past.
Yeah, I'm excited to help take back the narrative and kind of define it as we move into the future, as I've got, a daughter myself, and to try to raise her the right way. But maybe to that point about narrative, like take me and the people back to like maybe when you're a little girl, how did you come to navigate through school and through life, through college maybe, and then, the course that we're teaching is called community college. So how was your community a part of your development as you kind of made your way from a girl into womanhood?
I think I was raised by a single mom. My dad had influence in and out of my life, but my mom raised me, and she really raised me with the same mentality of how a young white boy is raised. And I think that's been such a service to me, just in terms of how I interact with the world, what I expect from the world, and how I show up in the world. And that's not to say that I didn't deal with racism or anything that, clearly let me know who I was, but teaching me to think in that way, to think there are no boundaries for me. I can be first here. I can, all of those characteristics that we tend to associate with whiteness, especially white maleness. My mom taught me to have those characteristics, but at the same time coupled with being an empathetic, sentient being, cares and others. And I think that really allowed me to take up space in school and not feel that I needed to shrink, to feel that it was absolutely okay to outshine and out excel anyone around me and not hold myself back because of what others expected me to be capped at. And so in school, that made for, I'd say, an easier path for me because I believed so much in myself. And, it also made it hard when I'd get tripped up in situations in which people's limitations were being enforced on me, because it made it even more unbearable and made more obvious that what was holding my situation back was really just because of racism or sexism.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that it was easy to be raised like that, because it made it that much more obvious when I was, being pushed upon. But I would say it gave me a leg up in just feeling that kind of innate confidence that allows me to move through and take charge of situations.
Yeah, that's cool. And for myself, I'm reflecting on it. I had to like find my own confidence. And when I step into it now, it's more based on, oh, I've done this before at this previous job or in this previous experience. But like when you first developing that confidence, maybe as a teenager, it was weird because I felt like I was faking it and had a little bit of imposter syndrome. And to this day, sometimes if I'm doing something that's brand new, I also kind of go back to being a teenager where I'm like, well, yes, I'm an adult and I'm like, quote unquote, qualified to do this, but like, I'm not sure. So like, do you feel that as well?
Is there another adult that's more adult than me that can handle it? Absolutely. I think that's very real. And I think part of the design of racism is also to always have us doubting our own merits and our effects. And so one of the things I've really been working on unlearning is this. I feel like I didn't have it when I was younger, and now I have it. And so I'm unlearning it. But like you said, the imposter syndrome. And one tool that I have that combats that I, sometimes use throughout my life is coming up and having like an achievements journal. Mm-hmm. Like every day I just write down the dope things that I do, like credit score up here, like da-da-da, like whatever it is that I worked on. Like that credit score is a number that jumped, but I put in the time to pay off my bills. I paid stuff on time. So it's like that is an achievement that I did. And even just the psychology of writing down your achievements boosts your confidence in such a way, because you can look at it and you're like, I'm not an imposter. I've been doing these things. I'm just in my own head about it. And I really need to like reset and just own this, And so I think that that's one of the ways in which I've created space for myself recently, and being able to see myself for who I really am rather than like through the reflection of how others see me.
Yeah, that's so good. Like adulting, like I actually am doing this, but you're not giving yourself credit because maybe we're living in such a fast-paced society where you're not reflecting and like taking the time to do that whole work.
Well, especially in a capitalist society, like capitalism is this awful drum, I think, that continues to beat and beat. And the thing is, like in a capitalist society, like the more you turn into yourself and find that you have everything you need, that's the opposite of what any design of capitalism is, because we're supposed to consume and buy things and stuff like that. And so the more you actually can realize that you have everything you need, it's in there. Everything you need to achieve your goals, your dreams, like it's in there. You might need to collaborate with people and, have assistance, but it is in there. You can do it. And I think just to kind of remind yourself of that, like the system is designed in a way to take you from that thought, but the more you can tune into it, the more healthy and stable you become.
Yeah, I think those topics are like starting to get presented and pushed in our face as we kind of decide what the country is going to be and look like for the next 4 years, and then for decades to come with the like Supreme Court nominee. Like, so with the confluence of all those things, coupled with like what's happened from a social injustice perspective, and like we've had highs and lows this year, like what is the time that we're in right now mean to you from like an opportunity perspective, and then maybe some of the challenges that are apparent and maybe not apparent that we need to get through?
Yeah, I am an optimist for sure. I even have a tattoo on my wrist that says Dum Spiro Spiro, which means while I breathe, I hope. Mm-hmm. And I think with any kind of structural breakdown, which is what we're seeing a destabilizing of America. I think it's, it's very scary, and I want to be honest about that. There's, a fear in the air that's very palpable, and that's completely understandable. I think it also creates access for opportunity. Sometimes when things are broken, you can see where they're broken, and you can make a plan to really wipe the slate clean and create something that's much stronger, much more durable, much more equitable. So the hope that I have right now is that we take all of this hurt and all this pain that has been exacerbated by coronavirus and stuff like that, that has always been there, but is just being, amplified now, and really sit and think of what kind of people and society do we want to be, and what's the direction we want to move forward in, because we have the opportunity to really create that right now. And so that's the higher point of this and my hope. The low point of it is that, like I said, everything was so exacerbated and things were already in really harsh conditions for so many people. And this just toppled them over in an unprecedented way. And the lows of that are seeing people struggle, seeing people hurt in the masses right now, and what can we do about it? What is our obligation to do something about it,
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the difference between the people who like get it, quote unquote, and the ones who are kind of living in like this American rebel state where it's like, we'll get through it, is that it hasn't happened to them or hit close to home enough for them to do the things that have been prescribed, wash your hands, wear a mask, like stay away from people as much as you can. So I'm hoping that like the recent events provide like a wake up call. And then to your point about capitalism and how it turns people inwards, it seems like if you could default to caring about and being sensitive to like what other people are experiencing and going through, and like having that as like your default first, and then after that being, it's okay to look inward, but like to be exclusively looking inward to the,
you need that balance.
Yes. So
yeah. And what you're talking is empathy, like being able to think of others and really take them into consideration and understand where they're coming from, even if you haven't been through that situation. And empathy can be taught. I think we are at a position where we really need to. And there's other things that play too, acetaminophen. They've come out with recent studies. It's in like 600 different pills, including Tylenol. And one of the side effects is that it lowers your empathy. And so kind of creates like a small blocker for you being able to understand the consequences of your risky behavior.
Yeah.
That makes sense in today's world. So it's just being conscientious and kind of, like we said, showing up and figuring out like, how do I want to be and how do I want to move in this world? And is it my best way of being?
Yeah. That's so interesting. I mean, I recently watched this. I don't know if you checked out The Business of Drugs on Netflix, and it kind of walks through all the different ones. And some of them, have had really, really bad influences on the masses. And it starts to make sense, like why we're living in some of what we're living in when you kind of juxtapose those events with what you're seeing. But then when I watched the one about cannabis, there's like kind of two ways. And I want you to like start to talk about kind of the industry you're in and like how you broke in and what it means to like make space in it. And then the opportunity for us to maybe as a nation do what's right. So many people are behind bars today as a result of, a third strike that relates to this particular herb. But like, just give us how did you get into this space as a Black woman? Like, what does it mean to make progress, and what have you seen? Kind of give us the trip report, so to speak, so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I was, a recreational but cavalier cannabis user in high school and college. I'd smoke a J here, stuff like that. And then I kind of stopped after like mid-college. I stopped smoking weed just because I just wasn't that into it. And when I was smoking it, mostly was just like, oh, this gets you high or it doesn't. I didn't understand strains or terroirs or anything that really went into this plant. And so it wasn't until I was job hunting and interviewing with this place and they seemed to have their stuff together. I really liked their website because it was very educational around cannabis. And anytime I can go learn something, that's like, so I got excited about, corresponding with them and talking with them. And so when I got hired and I moved into this space, I still had a very elementary understanding of cannabis. Like, it gets you high and that's it. And with my mom getting sick at that same time and seeing how it helped her in a medicinal way, she's been a recreational user, but seeing how CBD helped her with like her broken femur and stuff like that, really opened my eyes into the world of cannabis in a completely different way. It made me respect it as plant medicine, both recreationally and medicinally. Once I got into this space, it was hard being a Black woman in this space. It felt like this chasm kind of in myself of like wanting to show up and be a great employer for this company that I loved and saw them doing it the right way. And also feeling like I wasn't doing enough for all the Black and brown people who are currently sitting in jail or in prison for basically doing what I'm doing, you know? And so having to reconcile that was really important to me. And like I said, I work with a great company who really is pushing. 50% of the brands we carry are women-owned brands, and they always maintain that shelf space to keep women in cannabis, because cannabis is also a space in which, in the beginning, when the legal organizations of it started, women were in high executive positions, more so than any other industry. And as more funding and VC money has come in, that number continues to shrink. And so I really loved what they did in that respect with women-owned brands. And I advocated for them to do that same aspect with BIPOC brands, as a way to keep brands that are Black-owned and Indigenous-owned on our shelf space. There's programs that we've instituted, like shelf equity, which is, urging people to, when they're buying cannabis, ask who the brand is, who owns it, like really find out, just like you'd find out what food you're ingesting, find out where your cannabis is from, if it's ethically sourced, if it's Black, Indigenous owned, and creating that space. And so our hope is that by doing a series of commitments that we've made this year, that we can bring more Black and Indigenous brands into the mix and start flipping over that space, while at the same time directly giving mentorship access and apprenticeship access, as well as getting people out of prison and then expunging records. So as a company, we're doing all those things. Personally, there's other companies that I work with. There's a company called Black Cannajoy, which is creating the first Black cannabis compassion program for the trauma of racism. And I think that's beautiful. And so I'm seeing all these developments in the space to get our people not only out of jail and out of prison, to wipe off their records and then help create the next step. Because once you get out of prison, you really need something there. Otherwise, the recidivism rate is higher than 33%. So it's about creating more opportunity and more space for people who look like me in this space, and doing everything we can to right the wrongs from the war on drugs.
Yeah, it seems like the space, it started and then there was a bunch of action, and now there's a little bit of consolidation. It's slowed down a little bit. Legislation in each of the states has some work to do in order to like standardize across the board. But then, like, to your point about women being in leadership positions in the beginning, that same Business of Drugs doc that I was looking at was talking about how, all of this money is being pumped into it, and it's starting to make it very difficult for, BIPOC, like the mom and pop shops, to even compete with like these big, huge entities that are just able to like pour money into this. So like, how do you suggest that, a person who's wanting to contribute in this space go about things? Are there smart partnerships that have to happen? Are there legislation that folks are going to be waiting for? Because it seems like a land grab a little bit right now, and then once the legislation hits, it might lock in kind of the position that everybody who's got the money and got the resources and got the like history of having capital already is going to like cement their position. Do you see things differently, or like have any thoughts there?
That's a beautiful, beautiful question, because I think the approach is really two-pronged. I think you have to apply pressure where it needs to be, and then you also have to have smart partnerships, kind of what you mentioned. I think as someone coming into this space, it is going to be a very smart move to try to strategically figure out who to partner with, but who to partner with that won't take away your power in that structure. So that's what I mean by strategic partnering. Because I've seen some equity partnerships that have been really successful and really great, and I've seen some that have been horrible because of the wrong intentions going into it. So I think successfully partnering with the right people who share your vision and understand that they have the privilege and it's their duty to help use their privilege in order to bring more people in this space. So having that kind of alignment. And then pressure, what I mean by that is having all of us, the consumer to the business owners to, nonprofits, et cetera, put pressure on legislation to really do the right thing about the equity applicants, because, in LA, it's a disaster. And in lots of places it's a disaster because they're doing it the same way, which is not caring about the people who really got harmed by this and just trying to fast pass people, predominantly white men, into the space. And that can't be. So I know places like New York, I think last year there was a very big company, had all their ducks in a row, went to go get their license and was rejected because their equity program was an afterthought. And it was clear that it was an afterthought because it was just like, we're donating 20% instead of actually being innovative in that space and a pioneer in that space and really doing something effective. So I think having more legislation that blocks that kind of activity, which comes from us putting pressure on the legislation, and us calling into our senators and people and asking, like, what are the cannabis laws? What are the propositions that we should be aware of? Like, there's all kinds of things that touch off, like Prop 17 in California, which is directly related to people who have cannabis offense, nonviolent cannabis offense, and being able to vote, And so we really have to shift these systems that have harmed our communities. And that's the good news, is because we can apply that pressure to try to do that. And it's also using your dollar. That's like the most crucial thing, especially in our Black community, because we have a lot of money moving through. Yeah. You have to be conscious consumers. So consciously ask where your weed is coming from, ask who owns this. Let people know that you're interested in them like having and carrying Black, Indigenous, people of color owned brands, and that you won't be shopping there until you see that on the shelf. So there's ways that we can apply pressure in so many different ways, and we really need to, and we really have to be doing that while also making sure that we're protecting businesses that are trying to get through and supporting those businesses that are trying to get through.
Yeah, group economics. I think that's a real thing that we all need to be conscious of. And a thing that you touched on, like the difference between knowing when a company is coming in, and it's not exploitation, but it's like, know the difference between a PR opportunity and like somebody who's investing in something that can provide like economic empowerment to you and your family over time. And if it's not looking like that'll happen, whether it's in this industry or any industry, like technology industry or any other ones, don't accept like the afterthoughts or the scraps, because there's so much money that's being made and there's so much precedent that's being set that it's our responsibility on our side to say, thanks for this, but this is actually not good enough. Let me push this proposal back across the table. Like we can't take just anything that's offered.
I think it's one of like the biggest takeaways from this. Like, if you leave here with nothing else, please remember that it's up to you to be bold about what you want in this life. It won't be easily handed over or anything like that, but you do have the ability to make waves in whatever industry you're doing. And don't be afraid to walk away from a bad deal that doesn't serve you. I think I spent a lot of my early formative years starting my own business in the PR and event space, just taking everything that came my way because I didn't want to miss an opportunity.
Yeah.
It left me flatlining. It left me burnt out. It left me exasperated. And I think one of the biggest takeaways that I do now is, like, again, saying no. That no is so crucial, and being able to wield it like a weapon, because it kind of is, and being able to say, this isn't a deal that works for me. And then owning what you want. And they might say no, and that's fine, because you really should get what you want. If you've taken the time to really think about how you're setting up yourself in a way that's really positive and smart, you deserve to have that met as a need. So don't be afraid to say no to a company that isn't meeting those needs or isn't able to.
Yeah. I do, to that point, want to take you back a little bit to like what, you're an entrepreneur and have been, to reflect on kind of what that's meant, um, from the East Coast perspective. Like being an entrepreneur in New York is different than being an entrepreneur in like California, obviously. So maybe spend some time talking about like how you went from 0 to 1 in the businesses that you've run, kind of what the spaces were, and then I'll ask some questions about, um, things that I know the community would be interested in hearing from this. So just kind of set the stage for us and, some of the entrepreneurial ventures that you jumped into prior to what you're currently doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had an interesting little detour in college. I went to college originally to work for the CIA, and I was majoring in psychology. And then I fell in love with PR, and so I switched and pivoted. And so after school, I did a little bit of sales, and I think that was structurally important. I think it's always good to know sales. And then for me, my passion lied in really like getting into that PR aspect.
Mhm.
And so I started my own company pretty shortly after, a couple years after school, and was able to freelance successfully, on moderately successfully in some areas, on my own for about 10 years.
Mhm.
Um, and what that took was a lot. I did it, I think, in not the smartest way. So please like learn from my lessons. Mentorship is so key. I stumbled through so much of it without a mentor. And I really wish I had had and leaned on someone who I could appreciate their understanding and their wisdom and, their mistakes without having to make all of my own.
Mhm.
Um, but I also was able to meet so many incredible people and work with so many wonderful brands. And that shaped so much of my understanding of how to do things with a particular style, but also always stay fluid and be able to be flexible with how you approach things. And so that kind of led into, like I said, doing my own events for New York Fashion Week, and, working with clients like Nike and Adidas and stuff like that. And I'd say the entrepreneurship of it, I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. Even as a kid, I wanted to start my own businesses like when I was really, really young. And so having that freedom for me was really important. And I'd have to say it's not for everyone. And I think that that can be the biggest trip up when we're thinking of entrepreneurship. Learning my strengths and weaknesses as an entrepreneur took me a long time, but once I got it, it really was like the icing on the cake. You have to know what you're good at, what you're strong at, and you have to know what you're not. And then you have to know how to delegate what you're not. And it's okay to learn while you're delegating, but don't think you have to be in charge of everything. That's how you will ruin your business. So it really is learning, okay, I'm good at this. I'm going to lean into that. This isn't something I'm so great at, so I might hire out for that, or collaborate with someone and stuff like that. So I think that that would be one of the biggest takeaways from being an entrepreneur that I learned.
Yeah. And then like, what was like the shining moment, maybe one or two kind of client engagements or things that you were like especially proud of yourself, for pulling off in kind of those days?
Yeah, there were. So when I first started PR, we did an event with De Leon Tequila, and like Kim Kardashian was there. This was like way back in the day. We did stuff for MTV, which was, I'd say, like some of the hype, just because like we did parties for like my Sweet 16 and stuff like that. So stuff that I worked on, I got to see on TV, which is always just really thrilling and exciting. And then other stuff has been, some of the more charitable things that I've done have been really always like important to me. I've done stuff with PETA and whatnot. And then I'd say one of my favorites was this event I did in New York for New York Fashion Week. It coincided, just like a fun after party, DJ'd and stuff like that. And so anytime that I can bring this essence of fun and get people to put their phones down and just kind of detach and just have fun in the moment, I consider it a success. So if I see people dancing at my party, I know it's a good party.
Yeah, that's cool. Um, Maybe to the point about being a Black person and then a Black woman in that space. I know events is probably different than like tech is different than real estate is different than other places. Like, how did you find it, kind of with the identity that you hold?
That's a good question. And I really don't think that verticals matter because it's still kind of the same structure that's set up and the same ethos that's in most people's minds. I got discounted a lot.
Hmm.
I was even told, I think some of the harshest feedback I got was from my dad when I was starting off my business, which he was just very blunt in saying that I wouldn't be hired by predominantly white clients because they're not going to trust their business to me.
Hmm.
And I hated him for saying that at the time. And it was a really sad, horrible truth that I did come into connection with. And it was frustrating to see some of my contemporaries rise up and be able to take on events and have people give them money to create these events.
Yeah.
Questions asked. And me, I'm sitting here showing the success of my past events, like this, that, and the other, and still having people be like, but then seeing them do those same things with other people who are white.
Yeah.
That was heartbreaking and frustrating. And it continues to be like that, it continues to show up in those ways, of having a great idea, but having people not think that you have the ability to put that together in the same way. And there is I wish there was like a magical answer I could give to circumvent that. But the fact of the matter is it's, the black tax that we always talk about. You can have twice as much credit to your name, do twice as good work, and you're still kind of half assessed. And so I think for me, what I really had to tap into was, again, finding my strengths. If people weren't going to trust me to create these parties, then I needed to find ways in which I could create them on my own. Mm-hmm. And then have people be a part of that after the fact. And so that was one of the flips. Not an easy flip, because in order to do that, you have to have money. So it kind of becomes a catch-22, but it really is about linking up with the people who can understand your vision and believe in you. And that's kind of what we were saying before, like who to collaborate with, who to work with. You got to check people's records to see what they really believe in, see if they've been putting in the work. If they've been putting in the work, you can work with them. If they haven't, it's going to be a disaster. And that's what I've at least found. You can pretend to care, but you can't pretend to show up. And if someone is really wanting to be a part of your community and help build that community and support that community, you'll know from the history of their work and stuff like that, and partner up with those people and then build those dreams. Trying to do it on your own was one of the hardest lessons I've faced. But sometimes still necessary to know that you believe so much in your project, you are willing to do it on your own and build it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that, I've heard lots of stories of investors who, won't invest unless you're quitting your main job in order to jump fully into the thing that you're trying to get them to invest in. And number of challenges, like being a person of color, trying to do something for the first time and maybe on a shoestring budget. So I totally feel that. And maybe the next question about the future for you, like the next decade or the thing that you're interested in tackling, you think you'll be kind of in the space that you're in and then progressively kind of stick it out over time? Or you see any trends that are forming where you're like, ooh, that'll be nice in like maybe 5 years, and I want to kind of orient my career to get towards that? How are you thinking about the future right now?
Yeah, absolutely. In the space of cannabis, I see so much change happening. This summer really crystallized so many businesses understanding their part in creating this problem in cannabis, as well as their duty and obligation to help restore that balance. And so for me, I'm interested in seeing how much that plays out over the next few years, and not just watching idly and hoping that businesses do the right thing, but really calling them in and kind of organizing efforts around that. So I see my next 5 years around really, really still pushing hard and going hard for the community of my people who are sitting in prison right now, for building out this industry.
Yeah.
So I see that being as my call to action, and still, pushing. I love that my company does a give back on the first of every month. Yesterday, we just partnered with the Bail Project, where $10 from every order gets donated there. And I see myself creating other social programs to really, really push for those changes and to really get people out of prison who need to be out of prison.
Yeah, you've probably seen the Equal Justice Initiative and a bunch of organizations that are popping up as we see injustice more captured on phones. Not to say that the volume is any more, any less these days, but super exciting work that I think most people of color wish they could like hit Powerball and just like do the rest of their days in that space, but they gotta like pay the bills and take care of their family and stuff. So they contribute as much as they can and send prayers and thoughts and good energy towards everybody who's doing work in that space. So I'm for sure going to keep in touch so that we can understand kind of the orgs that you're partnering with, and then for the community to understand kind of where you can plug in and how you can plug in, even if you can't do it at 100% right now.
There's so many ways to support. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, especially like this year in the summer, with everything going on, like racially and climate, like for the election, is that there's no one way to show up right now.
Mm-hmm.
No one way to help with the revolution. There's no one way to help change things. There's a million ways to show up and help. And, you know, if your way looks like calling or text messaging or doing phone banks on behalf of people, someone else might be protesting, someone else is organizing, you know, someone else is spending bail money to get people out of jail. Like, there's a million ways to show up. The most important thing that you do is to show up, you know, in whatever way that you can, however you can, and whenever you can.
Yeah. 2 words: do something.
We're all hands on deck right now. So this is not the time to be like, well, if I just, no, like if you can do one small thing, do one small thing. If you can do a big thing, then do a big thing. You know, like however you can show up for the community, it's imperative that you do so. And don't think that your actions are too small. We all know the fable of like the mosquito. Like if you think your singular action doesn't matter, try spending the night in a room with a mosquito. You know, like you can evoke change even if you're a small being.
Yeah, so maybe we do a little bit of a lightning round. This will be fun. So like I'll name maybe 5 or 6 questions and just give the first thing that comes to your mind, and we'll open even more up to the people like who is June. So maybe we'll start with like favorite food.
Ooh, Italian. But then as soon as I say that, I say Thai. I'm also a Libra, so getting one question might be a challenge.
So pasta, like within the, are we talking pizza? Are we talking like, what are we talking about?
Always pasta. That's like always my favorite. Anytime I go to a restaurant, I'll order a pasta dish. The caveat being if it's Italian, always. But one thing, because I'm from Georgia, love some mac and cheese, which is like a different whole category. But I always judge restaurants by their mac and cheese if they have it on the menu.
Comfort food: greens, mac and cheese, and chicken. That's
I'm from Georgia.
my language. How about favorite place you vacation to?
Favorite place to vacation to? I always like the beach. Any kind of island I can go hopping. I really appreciate that. So I would probably say somewhere like in the Caribbean. Yeah.
Excellent. How about 2 books that you would recommend to the people that you really enjoyed?
I started On Tyranny Again by Dan Snyder, which I think is very relevant for right now. It's like 20 lessons from the 20th century on how to combat authoritarianism. So I think it's very timely. It's 126 pages. Get it, read it, share it with friends. So I'd say that book. And then I'd say a fun book. I'm starting Bell Hooks Talking Back.
Okay. Yeah. Love anything coming from Bell Hooks. How about, let's see. How about if you had 2 or 3 apps that you could have on your phone only, like what are your go-to 2 or 3 apps that you could not live without?
Instagram. I do. I love Instagram, especially now that I've shut down my Twitter. I have it, but I deleted the app, so I'm really not trying to be on it like that because I was getting very stressed out and losing time on there. But so Instagram, I still love. I really adore. I love VSCO just because I'm such a photography head. It's how I express myself, and I take pictures, and you know. And then the third app, I'd probably say my news app just because I gotta stay informed even if I'm not on Twitter.
Yeah. How about, let's see. I don't know if you're a car person or not. Like if you could drive any car or have any car, like what would it be?
Okay, I dream about this because I am a car person. I love to race. The McLaren F1, driving that on the Autobahn is like goals. Like I will achieve that. It's on my life list before I pass away. But just to own, I would take a Maserati. I mean,
Okay.
I wouldn't cry if someone gave me a Maserati. I would love to drive that.
Nor would I. Nor would I. How about let's go to Netflix. Maybe 2 or 3 things that you watched that you really enjoyed that you recommend to the community.
Love some Netflix, probably more than I should. I recently finished Midnight Gospel. Have you heard of it or watched it?
No, I haven't.
I cannot recommend this show enough. It is very weird. You've probably passed over it a million times and like, that's not something I'm going to watch. But it's an animated series. It's only 8 episodes long. The audio is taken from a podcast interview. So this podcast that you can listen to separately if you don't like the animation going along with it. But the animation that accompanies it is very weird. It kind of fits into what's happening and also doesn't at the same time. And they talk about really deep stuff. The last episode is about death. Mm-hmm. And I'd say it really, really, really helps bring peace to me, especially around losing my dog last week. I watched that episode just last week. And I think with everything going on right now, with the grief, with COVID, with people losing people, we don't really process grief in this society. We're not taught to. The amount of people who asked me if I was going to replace my dog within an hour of him passing, let me know we really don't handle pain well.
Yeah.
And this episode was just coming from someone who doesn't like to cry in front of people. It was such a beautiful, powerful episode about how to handle grief and how to handle death. And so I recommend Midnight Gospel a million times over. The second show I'd recommend, for me, when I need like respite from the craziness and drama, I really enjoy the British Baking Show.
Oh my gosh, my daughter and my wife love that.
It is so calming, and I can't bake even though I try. I can sometimes do it. I can do it when I'm making like muffins and stuff like that, which I'll add like CBD into, which is like a life hack right now. But yeah, British Baking Show, because it's just so calming and nice. And I'd add another, Lovecraft is on HBO, not Netflix. So yeah, I'd stay with those 2.
Okay. Let's go like superpowers. So if you were an Avenger or some kind of superhero, some people go for invisibility, some people go for strength. Like what would be the thing that you would take?
So what's funny is I always joke that I have a superpower already, which is perceived innocence, which doesn't sound like a superpower, but for a Black woman in this country, perceived innocence is actually very much a superpower. And I've had this response, which is very much a privilege, which I take very seriously, where I'm believed, by cops and stuff like that. I am thought of as innocent. People don't think, like when I was in high school, no one ever thought I smoked cigarettes, much less weed. Like I could get busted and teachers would still be like, no, it was supposed to be a mistake. Like that kind of level, So, and I've gotten away with so much stuff. So I use that privilege. I try to use it on behalf of other people when and where I can, because I do see it as a superpower.
Perceived innocence. I have to like take a note on that one and keep it in my back pocket. My daughter's very cute right now, and then I'm sure that her and you are like here with it. How about, you mentioned fashion, right? And I have way too many pairs of like sneakers. Like, this is not even like, fast question. It's like, how do you view the world of fashion? Like, how do you approach like dressing yourself? I have to take care of a family, so I'm like trying not to look at stuff so I don't spend money and like not tempted. So like, how do you, just give me a couple of thoughts in that space?
Yeah, well, so I model, and I've modeled from when I was like 12. So fashion is such an interesting relationship. Specifically, I avoid fast fashion. That's something I've really been mindful of, like moving away from. And I understand like the price points are really, really attractive. So I get it. Like when I was broke, I couldn't be dreaming of, buying Chloe and stuff like that. So fast fashion was where it's at. But I do hope we move away from that. And I love seeing companies like Reformation that are like, my friend started up a sustainable company called Brea Box, which is like sustainable fashion that's like sent to you. So I love seeing sustainability move into fashion. So now I'm trying to buy pieces that are sustainable instead of like seasonal,
Mm,
and really
yep.
trying to find my style instead of trending. And that's helping me save money because I'm not just buying something because, you know, I saw some celebrity in it and it's going to be not even popular in 6 months, you know, or 2 months these days. I'm really trying to be like, well, that's a piece that I can have in my closet for a long time. So kind of changing how I understand how I'm even buying it in the first place. But I also use Rent the Runway because I think that that's like sustainably great. And I think it's a great program. And I'm excited personally as a model, also seeing how much change is coming into the industry. I've been watching the shows in like New York and Paris recently, and I'm seeing um, different abilities on the runway. I'm seeing different ages on the runway, different sizes, different colors, and it's finally getting exciting, in my opinion. So I love where fashion is going. I'm looking forward to seeing how it changes and shifts through this COVID, you know, and seeing where that goes. But I'm trying to also be smart about not spending too much money on my fashion
Yeah.
since I'm going anywhere anyway.
Yeah. Yes. Maybe last lightning round question, since we're in the midst of the NBA finals. You have a preference around the Heat or the Lakers?
Lakers, because I moved here from LA. I was in LA for so long. Like,
Okay.
it's Lakers.
Okay. Yeah, they game one looked really, really good. So I think they might be on their way.
Yeah,
Um,
good matchup this game. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, and with Kobe and like this is maybe destined to happen. Just like this would be a great way for the NBA season to end as a tribute to one of the greatest.
yeah, for
Yeah.
real.
Cool. Well, the last question I'll ask, and I appreciate you like so much for jumping in here, and I've had fun on the conversation. How can we, as a community, help you? Like, what can the community do to either connect with you or to push stuff forward that you care about? Just give us a couple things that we could do to be helpful.
Yeah, well, if anyone wants to find me on Instagram, my name is Love June Johnson. And the company that I mentioned that I work for is Sava. They're on Instagram at Get Sava, Sava. And I'd say how you can help me and show up is really just if you're a cannabis user or if you know and love people who are cannabis users, make sure that you know where your cannabis is coming from. Demand shelf equity when you call up your delivery company or you go into your dispensary. Ask how many brands they have that are BIPOC owned. Ask that they get more than whatever they have, and keep pushing for our people to be in this space. And then also tap into the organizations like Equity Organization, First Alliance, different places who are Bail Project, using their ability to get people out of jail and prison who are nonviolent offenders. So donate if you can, share it online if you can, like whatever way you can show up and do something in this space, I urge you to.
Amazing, amazing. Well, again, June, happy Friday. We thank you so much on behalf of the whole community for rocking with us this morning. And we'll get this conversation out so that folks can check it out. And yeah, don't be shy. Connect with June here. Another green room in the bag. Enjoy the weekend. And thanks so much for hanging out with us, June.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a beautiful program that you all have set up, and I just feel honored to be a part of it. So thank you again.
Awesome. Let's connect too. Take care of yourself. Stay safe and stay sane out there.
Bye.
All right. See ya.